therapists Rebecca Harvey and Alexis Munson have been close friends for over a decade. They met when their children became friends in the first grade. Both Rebecca and Alexis are raising girls, and they're both therapists. Over the years, they've supported each other through the ups and downs of parenting. Today, 41% of parents say that most days they're so stressed they can't function. That's according to the 2024 Surgeon General Advisory, Parents Under Pressure. And this stress goes beyond the costs and demands of raising a child. In a world filled with uncertainty, many parents fear what the future holds for their kids. Even therapists are feeling this stress. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shen. Today, we talk about parenting in uncertain times. And parents, we would love to hear from you. What have been some of the biggest challenges in raising kids for you right now? Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So with us here today is Rebecca Harvey, professor at Southern Connecticut State University in the Marriage and Family Therapy Program. Rebecca, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
And also with us is Alexis Munson. She's a licensed clinical social worker based in North Haven. Appreciate you being here as well.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we're really excited to have this conversation. I think hopefully it will resonate with a lot of people. So we'd love to start with knowing more about how did you guys meet and how did you first connect?
Yeah. So it's such a pleasure to do this, such an important topic, and such an amazing pleasure to do it with Alexis, because I think our story is about the kind of hope and just grounded energy, fun, humor that we've brought to our friendship. And our friendship has centrally been about has been built on how do we do parenting better. Mm-hmm. And so that we're here doing it together is so amazing to me.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Rebecca Harvey.
Exactly.
And what's from your perspective?
So from my perspective, I mean, it's been a magical experience, honestly. And I've told the story so many times because the way that we met was our daughters met on the first day of first grade. Mm-hmm. And they came, my daughter came off the bus and told me about this new friend she made. And about a week or so later, there's a back to school picnic. And, incoming are Rebecca and her daughter. And, my daughter sort of pipes up, there she is. And, we invited her to sit down with us. And we happened to be eating some Popeye's fried chicken. And I was like, would you like some of that? And, found out that she was an MFT professor who moved from Pennsylvania to Connecticut to work at Southern. And at the time I was doing adjunct work at Southern as well, but in the social work department. And we were both therapists. We both have social work degrees. And
so many parallels.
And our daughters are actually 4 days apart.
Wow.
Yeah. They're now seniors in high school.
Yeah.
So.
That is amazing.
First grade to senior year. We've traveled together. And
so first graders, 4 days apart, fried chicken, and friendship. That's the 4 Fs as a theme.
Correct. That's right.
And because you've gone through all of the things together, so how has parenthood evolved for both of you, especially since now both of your daughters are older and our world has changed so much?
Yeah.
I'll go with Rebecca first.
Sure. Yeah, I think, so I moved to Connecticut. It's been 12 years now. I was a single white queer mom who had no idea. I didn't know anybody in Connecticut. And when I got here, I did not understand. I don't think any of us understood what the next decade was going to bring into our lives. Mm-hmm. And so much of our work as clinicians and as, I guess, our own work is about trying to figure out the beauty of what we want to hand forward to our kids from our past, the things from my family that I loved and was grateful for, and also how do I not hand forward the things that were destructive and not good for me? And that's happening. So how do I do for my child what was not done for me? And that's happening in a cultural context that's kind of explosive and volatile. So that's kind of the vertical stressors are what was handed to us by our parents. The horizontal stresses are what's happening in the environment around us. And then finding Alexis and our shout out to our friend Shauna.
Yes.
And then other people who were just able to laugh and be hopeful and to not be sort of overly performing parenting,
Sure.
but sort of in there being parents with you kind of shoulder to shoulder. And that kind of connection has been really really important, central.
Yeah, very, very valuable. So, I we would just talk. It helped that the girls wanted to spend so much time together. So, it was, and another shout out to Shauna, who, within 6 months or a year became part of our team. The kids just wanted to spend lots and lots of time together. So as moms, we got to spend lots and lots of time together, lots of meals shared. Eventually we started traveling together, and all of our ideas would be shared in car rides and over, dinner and sitting in the backyard watching the kids play. And, we just really started sharing the grit of parenting, which was fun because we could laugh about it. We could laugh about, some of the things that our kids thought we were doing wrong.
Which was a lot.
And they're going to tell you.
Yeah. It was... it was a lot of just really shared reality and authenticity. And also about our relationships, our relationships with our families of origin, with our partners. And, it was just deep and authentic.
And a lot of witnessing, like just sort of, we were talking earlier about being in the weeds of having kids that are 5, 6, 7 and watching them go through potty training and going to school for the first time, and the sort of unrealistic expectations that can go with that and create a lot of stress for parents. And as if there's any one right way to go through that, and being kind of shoulder to shoulder in the grit with other families who you could see how they were different and beautiful in their own kind of different way. And then you could validate what they had to do, and they could help you figure out, that's not going to work for me. I got to try this other thing because I'm just a different person and we're a different family set.
Right. And then, we talked about how there's no playbook anyway, but there's certainly no playbook in a world where we don't really know what's going to happen next, which is essentially always the case. But because we have so much information exposure now, so much is available literally at our fingertips, I think it complicates what is already a complicated situation regardless. So was it helpful? And when did you start hearing similar things from your clients? Because it's interesting to hear that both of you have navigated this as parents, but you're also hearing similar experiences from your own clients. And was it helpful to realize that, not just us, not just our neighbors, not just our fellow families, but a lot more people out there?
I'd like to answer that, is that I think the clients that are raising a little bit older children are a little bit more in tune, like with how the horizontal volatility is affecting them. Because I think the people that are raising the smaller children are really in the weeds of it. I'm not saying they're not impacted. I'm saying they're less aware of it. And sometimes it's actually helpful to bring into the room that's also happening for them. Like that, hey, you have this added layer of stress that you're probably not conscious of at this moment, but it's there. So give yourself a little grace, right? Potty training is hard. I share with a lot of my clients what was shared with me when my daughter was struggling, or I was struggling, I should say, because it was me. That she's like, hey, your daughter's not going to go to prom in diapers. And I'm like, that was really helpful.
And funny.
And I've shared that with clients. Like, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Because
you're in the moment. So it's kind of hard to get out of that.
Well, and I was telling Rebecca, I have my beloved late mother-in-law, like love her so much, did send me a book that I looked at and was like, that goes in the trash.
My own mom was like, she read a couple parenting books and she was like, they were not helpful at all because your life experience is not written on the pages, right? You can't follow step 1 to 3.
Exactly. And the control children have at that age, and this is what parents are what I'm talking with parents of that age children. I actually have a subset of clients that are friends and kind of all got married and had kids and have kids around the same age. And the power the kids have is when they pee and poop, when they eat or don't eat, and will they go to bed? Maybe. That's how they have control. And so to get into a power struggle with them is really frustrating.
Well, and Alexis, or Rebecca actually, what are you hearing from your clients, and what are some of the things that perhaps are at the forefront of their minds that you take back home and you think about it?
Yeah, I think the level of fear and anxiety all over the spectrum. It doesn't matter who you are, what you believe, how you're living. There's just a real elevated sense of what is the future going to bring.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, I feel that too. I feel my clients feel that, my students feel that. And a sense of when you feel that way, you can isolate yourself and kind of get stuck in the threatened part of your brain that then shows up in relationships in a threatened, shut down way. And so helping people really recognize when they're dysregulated, recognize when they're threatened, and then kind of ease out of it, develop skills to ease out of it, and then to think about how they actually who do they actually want to be in relationships so that they can model that. There's something really hopeful for me about that, and it's helped me, because I don't think the change is coming from the top down in our world, right? It's coming from real people doing real hard work of showing up when other people are acting crazy, showing up calmer, going, oh, I could start speaking right now, but I'm actually pretty upset and regulated and dysregulated and pissed off. So maybe I'll just learn to shut up till I'm not feeling that way. And that's sometimes huge.
So I really would like to respond. First of all, I'm just loving and admiring you right now as I hear you say all that, because one of the things that Rebecca and I do for one another is we will call each other. And Shauna, you're back at you, Shauna, is in there too, to kind of say like, whoa, something happened, whether it's with my mom or another member of my family or my kiddo. And I am really, the language we often use is, I don't feel like I'm in self. And I just need to share that. I just need to tell somebody, like, I'm going to calm myself down and this is what I'm going to do. And Rebecca might be like, okay, so how are you going to do that? You know? And I might say the things that I want to say to my kid or my partner to her, and then edit.
Right.
And I'll be like, I totally get that.
Right.
But you're not going to say that to her.
No, you're not.
So it's almost like a mix of, I need to rant about this, and then we're going to figure out a solution to this problem.
A better way to say it.
And I'm glad you kind of both came on this, because I do want to ask both of you too, because there's a lot that you're taking in, both in your personal life as parents and also for other people, your clients. And so when you have all of this information coming at you, it sounds like you have ways to protect yourself or to learn how to manage your own parental anxiety and burnout. So with the 3-way calls, besides that, anything else that you have come across or have learned from your own experiences of how to manage your own anxieties?
Tons, yeah. I mean, aside from the obvious of things of, meditation and walking and working out, I think for me it's been so mind-changing to think about developing my relationship with myself. Like, I can notice when I'm upset, I can notice when I'm angry, I can notice when I'm not at my best, and I can back myself away from the edge and just kind of lovingly be like, hey, it's okay. Like, I know that sounds so, I guess maybe simple, but it's so difficult to actually do, to actually witness yourself being imperfect and being like, it's okay, let's just breathe and just stop trying right now.
It sounds almost a bit of building the habit.
Yeah, it's a practice. It's absolutely a practice. And it's not like, sometimes students kind of idealize you, clients might idealize you. And part of what we're doing is teaching clients not to do that. We're sharing with them, we are in this muck just like you are, and modeling for them how to do something hard by offering ourselves up as examples of that, in ways that are appropriate and not too strange.
Boundaried, but not overly clinically, like I'm not a stone here in the room with my clients.
Right.
We're kind of like we are right now. Yeah.
But you are also a fellow human being.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And I might even be like, I was really, I noticed this thing. I was really knocked out of self last week. And I tried to practice what I might preach to you. And, I took a hot shower. I went for a walk. I made sure I drank my water.
Well, and building on what Rebecca was sharing earlier too, a lot of parents are navigating an enormous anxiety and uncertainty today. And many parents feel like they don't know how to raise their children in a world where success feels harder and harder to reach, whatever that success looks like for everyone. So how are you navigating that now?
So one of the things that we did not talk about leading up, but we both talk about in our work is containment boundaries. And a containment boundary is a boundary that you use to protect the world from you. And I think this is particularly important in parenting because you do not need to share your anxieties with your children. You can have them. You will have them.
Right.
There's no choice there. But that's what the friendships or the connections that you can make are all about. Share them with adults, peers, not with your kids. When you put your anxiety on your kids, it definitely, amplifies what they're already dealing with, especially the kids that are already plugged in and tuned into the internet and all the things that we're tuned into.
Well, it's interesting to hear you say that because I just had a friend share with me, adult friend, who has recently been listening to a lot of what his mom is sort of complaining about his dad. And so I'm curious to hear from your perspective of, does the age matter when the relationship is mother to son or mother to daughter or father to son, father to daughter?
I have feelings about that. I have opinions about that. I think there is some sharing that it can be healthy if it's boundaried as a person is an adult, basically. But I still think to put even your adult children in between your relationship with your partner is generally not healthy. They don't really want to hear it, even though they might feel compelled to listen because they're trying to be good kids as adults. As a 35-year-old, my mom's telling me that my dad's, being a pain in the ass and I should listen to that, but it's actually not healthy for anybody.
Well, then, Rebecca, we talked about earlier too, how to not include, but like parental stress can also impact stress among kids. And where the context is more younger children. So maybe we'll start there. How do we know about how parental stress impacts kids?
Well, you can see it in kids' behaviors. Often in family therapy, we'll have people come in and say, hey, can you help my child? They're having this issue. And we'll start noticing the parental energy around that and how it directly affects what's happening for the child, right? So we're often asking larger questions about, hey, so how are you doing in this? And we'll often find, if we go back to that example for a second about the adult son with his mom, that mom would expect that she's going to have reactions to the father, that she has stress, that we'd want her to expect and understand that, because her denial or her thinking she's not supposed to have that actually leads to the possibility and the likelihood that she's going to vent that energy in some sideways way to whoever's closest, in this way her son. That same thing is happening with little kids. If you don't expect that you're stressed out, expect that that's normal part of parenting, and know what to do with it, it's going to leak out on your kids. You're going to get stressed out about them not being potty trained. You're going to be on top of them in a way that's going to make them know that that's a kind of power and control they can have.
Well, and then building on what you were both talking about earlier too is, so try to avoid doing that as much as possible in terms of parent stress to kids. And Alexa's mentioning, talk to adults, talk to your peers, find some sources. But of course, we recognize that parental loneliness is huge. And I don't know if that's changed too much, really. It's a very lonely experience. And a lot of parents feel very isolated. And amazingly, both of you have enormous resource in each other. So what are other ways that you would like to see better support for parents? Like how does a parent go out and find resources? Because I think oftentimes it's the first step that's the hardest. What questions to ask? Who do I reach out to?
May I speak to that? I hadn't thought about this on our car ride up, but I'm thinking about it right now because I experienced it recently. Sometimes it can be your doctor, like a physician, right? A good physician can kind of listen to that if you have the courage to talk about it. It could be a teacher, right? That, like I'm really struggling with this at home. If you know your child likes a teacher and you trust that teacher, that could be a person. But what Rebecca and I spoke a lot more about was kind of tuning out the performative parenting that we see on social media and other places in the world, and tuning into the real talk, because it can be really validating. Even if you don't, hey, I wish everybody had a Rebecca and a Shauna in their life. I really try to help my clients find their people. But if they can't, what I'm trying to help them do is be one of their people, right? And be real talk with them and then also point them in places, television shows. There's a show called Better Things. Excellent show. If you haven't seen it and you're raising, and she's got 3 children in the show. They're all girls, but it's very good, and it's real talk, the whole program. So things like that can inform you differently.
Well, I mean, when we're having a great conversation, we always have to come to an end, unfortunately, but we do have a couple of minutes left, and I want to share a comment from Austin on Twitter. Austin shared that the mental load of parenting is no joke. The invisible labor that markets just don't price in. Hope people calling in get some real practical support. So thanks, Austin, for your comment. And it follows what we were just talking about in terms of how to find parental support. So want to finish off this conversation by having you both respond to what Austin has to say.
Yeah, I'm just the heavy. We were talking about earlier the heaviness I feel for my clients sometimes, just at what the amount of stuff that they're dealing with, and wanting to help them connect, and also just to expect. We talked earlier about like the throwing the book in the trash, or the knowing that these rules aren't going to help. I'm really trying to help my clients plug into what intuitively they know is not going to work for them, and to not keep putting energy into being the kind of parent that they aren't going to be, and to not putting energy into the performance of it, and to tune, like I guess we're talking about tuning in more to what actually works for them, and what feels real, what feels grounded to them, and finding their people.
And allowing themselves to be, or finding places where they can be witnessed. I think Rebecca said it perfectly earlier when she was talking about developing and continuing to nurture her relationship to herself, which sounds like woo-woo. but there is practical ways of doing that if you need help. I mean, obviously we're both proponents of therapy.
Yes, of course.
I'm not only a proponent, I have been in therapy for many, many years myself. I share that with my clients. So don't hesitate to look for help that way.
And it's funny. Parenting is funny. I mean, one of the examples we were talking about earlier was, we think, oh, we're just so much better than our parents were. We're trying so hard. Right. We're in there. And then, I'm surprised that like when my daughter turns 12 and she's hating on me, and I'm like going to Alexis, like, can you believe it? I'm trying so hard to do this. And she's like laughing her butt off at me. Like, are you kidding me? That's her job. And so to have somebody ground you and laugh with you and see, and still love you. Like, I know Alexis loves me, and I know she's going to push me. And that kind of relationship, the people that can see your beauty and challenge your kind of bullcrap.
Well, I hope this conversation will help those who are looking to take that first step, and hopefully it resonates with them. You've been listening to Alexis Munson, who's a licensed clinical social worker based in North Haven. Alexis, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
And you were also listening to Rebecca Harvey, who's a professor at Southern Connecticut State University. Thank you so much, Rebecca, for sharing your experience.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
So parents, we know you're listening in, and we would love to hear from you. Let us know, what are you struggling with right now? What's the hardest part of being a parent for you? And if you have any tips or tricks that you've learned that you want to share with others, we would love to hear it too. Give us a call, 888-720-9677, or leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. You can also email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. Stay with us. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shin. Parents, how are you doing today? No, really, we want to know if you're doing okay, because the data says many American parents are struggling. From sleepless nights and the high cost of daycare to social media, the news, and nonstop weekend activities, today we're talking about parental anxiety and stress, and we would love to hear from you. Let us know, what is it like parenting kids today, and what's stressing you out? Call us now. We're live, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. Joining us now is Melissa Whitson, professor of psychology at the University of New Haven, and she's also a licensed clinical psychologist. Thank you so much, Melissa, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also George Gogis, who's a licensed clinical social worker at Charter Oak Therapeutic Services. Thanks, George, for being back.
Thanks for having me back. You made me feel real special.
Well, thank you so much for coming back to talk about this very important topic, and hopefully it will help or resonate with our listeners today. And I know both of you were listening to our conversation earlier. We'd love to hear from Melissa, what are your thoughts about what Rebecca and Alexis has to share?
I thought what they were sharing was very meaningful, and a lot of what they were sharing makes a lot of sense and what parents have to deal with now in terms of everything that there's so many strategies about how we're supposed to be parenting and all these expectations around that. There's so many choices, and we're told it's, you have to do it this one way or your child is going to be irrevocably harmed. And then someone else says the exact opposite that you have to do. And so, there's all these panic headlines. Emily Oster is a great economist who does parenting books, and she has, podcasts about late night panic Googles that parents have and kind of debunking these panic headlines. But when you're a parent, particularly a new parent, it's hard to make sense of all this incoming information about that. And you're told that here's some scripts that we have to be perfect parents. And if that doesn't happen, then it is going to cause harm. And really what it's important to show our children that we're human and we make mistakes, and even apologizing to our kids is showing them how to be in the world. And that's so important. But there's so much pressure that if we don't do it right, and what is right is defined differently by different people, then something bad is going to happen to our kids. And that's just so much pressure.
And George, you were listening to anything that jumped out to you?
I mean, I think they were a tough act to follow because they definitely gave out some good information. But I agree. I think, there's this idea of a perfect picture that's put out there. No offense, Instagram, but that's one of the biggest ones. That everything goes well, right? And everything's always going perfectly, and you have to know everything and do everything the right way and be this way or look this way or have this rug in your living room or whatever. And there's so much external influence these days. I mean, we've always faced that in America for sure, but there's so much these days that it's so hard to sort through that people are trying to be everything, right? And fit in everywhere and do all the things that they're supposed to do and have these experiences. It's a huge stressor,
So I want to come back to the Surgeon General's report that we mentioned earlier, but because of what George just shared, I would love, Melissa, your perspective on, I think the comparison trap always existed, but with what George just mentioned, with the added layer of social media, and we also mentioned earlier, we have so much information now and images too, even though I think most of us know there's more stories behind the picture, right? But when we see the photo, that's what we see, that first moment, right? So you have so much, like you mentioned too, there are so much different information on how to parent. It sounds super disorienting, especially today.
Yes, social media, parents are obviously not immune to the social comparisons that happen on social media and the internet. I have two children too who are 11 and 6, and I remember when COVID first hit, and I was like, I don't know how am I going to survive this? And I would see people talking about how well they were doing and how they had all organized. I'm like, what is wrong with me? And I'm a psychologist, and I was still, falling to that. And so, of course, other parents are as well. It's just constant, this is how we should be doing things. And if we're not being these perfect parents, then something has gone wrong. And that's in our face all the time.
When actually you mentioning during the lockdown period, I saw so many, whoever's influencing my algorithm, I was seeing so many beautiful lunch boxes.
Yes.
Because a lot of parents are saying, oh, now I have time. And I was like, is this real?
No.
No, go for it, George.
Well, I was just saying that, the expectations are so high these days from all those influences. Everything looks great. What do you think happens when people can't meet those expectations, right? They turn inward and they say, well, there's something wrong with me. I should be some happy, smiling person on Instagram all the time and have all these great things in my life. But that's not the truth, right? That's not the authentic life that we live, and kind of staying grounded and doing what's best for us and our families, I think, is important.
Well, and Melissa, we mentioned earlier that in 2024, there was a Surgeon General report called Parents Under Pressure, reported that 41% of parents say that most days they're so stressed that they can't function. So why do you think this generation of parents is experiencing so much anxiety?
Well, I think like what George said, there's so much pressure that we turn inward and we're like, what is wrong with us? We're failing in some way. And we have these high expectations. And quite frankly, we don't have any systemic supports to help us meet those expectations. And particularly parents that have not a lot of supports or lack of resources, when they don't have that and they can't meet these expectations, honestly, exhaustion sets in. And so they either kind of get frozen and can't function, or they might check out. And so schools or other parents might think, oh, they're checked out, they're not involved with their kids. But really, they're just exhausted, because how are you supposed to keep up with that, particularly when you don't have systems set up to support those high expectations?
One thing that I've noticed related to that, and I try to help my clients work on, is with all the expectations that we mentioned, no one seems to be adjusting their own personal standards with things. They keep the same high-level expectation. Their kids in sports 6 days a week. One of my clients works, has 2 young kids, a family, and he's like, oh, I got to cut the grass twice a week. I'm like, you do? Why? Why do you got to cut the grass twice a week? And so, oh, my neighbors do it. And I was like, that's that external influence you guys were talking about earlier that we need to be aware of, right? In my neighborhood, one person starts cutting the grass, then another person, and then this person, all of a sudden everyone's doing it. And we need to kind of carve our own path, I think, in life, especially now with all these high expectations.
Yes, Maya's the yard that is not cut.
And we have a local gardener who will suggest to not cut grass that often, but that's a story for another day. But besides cutting grass, George, because you run a men's group focused on social skills and relationship building, so what are you hearing from fathers right now?
Well, I think that, everyone has external influences. I think that nowadays men tend to struggle more so. Traditionally, through my education stuff, women have been more influenced by certain, media, commercial stuff like that. I think that everyone's kind of subject to that now. So I think a lot of men have a hard time kind of being more assertive, kind of showing up for their family because they don't know what they're supposed to do. Behavioral issues in the households and stuff. They tend to take a back seat to that type of stuff. We were talking about in the green room, even like socialization, like traditionally a lot of men socialize through their woman partner, right? Their friends. And if you don't have a partner, if your partner doesn't have a lot of friends, men tend to really struggle for that camaraderie. And that's really why I started this group. And,
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think with that isolation too, so if there are no friends around or no support services around, people will tend to look to the internet. And that's when the social media comes in, as you mentioned earlier. And I think we do see a bit more sort of momfluencers. And so how do you think social media is impacting dads? Is it helpful to see moms doing their thing for dads, or with the endless scroll, as Melissa mentioned earlier, the pressure to be perfect is on both?
Yeah, I think, the pressure to be perfect is on both, and there is the idea, and I think, traditionally women have taken that main role as far as like providing for the you know what I mean, like stepping up, doing what they got to do, showing up at the schools, volunteering their time, and I think men see that, and it makes them feel even more of like operating from a deficit, and sometimes it's hard to know where to start and where to get involved. And
as we had talked about earlier and also right now, getting a gist that a lot of parents are being more mindful in a very different way and very intentional on how they parent. So maybe parenting is a little bit different compared to how they were parented, right? So with these great intentions, can that also add and create anxiety?
Oh, it most certainly can. And it does. I'm Gen X, so we've heard stories about how kind of now all Gen X parents would be considered free-range parenting. And that's like an extreme. But oftentimes it's this expectation that we're supposed to take care of our kids and keep them safe from everything, rather than letting them experience challenges, experience sadness. They have to be happy all the time. When we know that psychologically that is not realistic, nor is it healthy, because they can't be happy all the time. That would be psychologically unhealthy, because that wouldn't be accurate. So oftentimes when we're figuring out how to keep our kids safe and keep them happy, then you have all this anxiety around it. And how we deal with that anxiety is sometimes that we try to exert way more control over our kids' lives. Talk about helicopter parenting and things like that. Although my daughter says I'm a helicopter parent because I won't give her a phone. So she doesn't quite understand what that is yet. But we're not giving our kids any freedom to make those mistakes and to struggle or to even fail. And that's actually how they cultivate competence. So that if they don't have those experiences, then it's really hard for us to back up and it's hard for them to know how to navigate the world. And so that anxiety will inevitably lead us to try and control things more because that's how we can kind of keep things safe and make sure everything's the way it's supposed to be and following those intentional practices. But it's not as healthy for us or our children.
Yeah, going off of that, I think there's this idea, or most people have this idea. I say the number one coping skill that any client ever tells me is keeping busy, and there's this idea that we're not supposed to feel uncomfortable emotions, right? Or be stressed, or be anxious, or even have some physical pains. And there's this idea that we're not supposed to do that. So people tend to shove it aside, assert more control, right? Sign up for their kid for 10 more sports each week, cut the grass twice a week, right? Just to have something active to do to not experience uncomfortable emotions. But unfortunately, that's not a perfect system, and those emotions creep up, so people kind of double down. So I think part of what I help clients do is to be more mindful, to be more grounded, and normalize that we're going to have bad emotions. And so will our kids, right? And as you said, that's how kids learn, right? Distress tolerance. They go through tough things, they overcome it. You learn to trust yourself a little bit more.
Well, I just wanted to add that another big distraction that people use is phones and the internet, right? Because that is a way to kind of distract ourselves so we don't have to sit with those emotions.
Well, and I want to go back to George, you mentioning being more mindful, and there's some practices that you can do here because that echoes what Rebecca mentioned earlier too, is to go inward and figure out, what works for you to practice the mindfulness. So what does that look like for you, George?
Well, as far as how I describe mindfulness, I always say there's like two tracks to it. There's like the grounding part, calming down your physical body, breathing techniques, using your senses, things like that, just to be more present in general, which I'm glad they said it earlier. It's a learned skill. It doesn't just happen right away. And the other part is, I call it like the deeper part, the awareness piece of it, where you create like I always say my boy Eckhart Tolle changed my life, but you become the observer of your thoughts rather than the victim. So you start to see when your internal dialogue is saying, you need to do all these things, or you need to have all these experiences, or your kids are this or that, to be aware of it without getting wrapped up in the emotional response to it. Once we can do that, we see where our mind's kind of going, and we can say, you know what? I'm actually not going to cut my grass today, right? It's all right. It looks pretty good. And I know that sounds simple, but as they were saying earlier, it is a learned skill that takes a lot of mindful practice, breathing, grounding, meditation, but it is a developed skill, and it can be a very powerful tool for people.
Well, I didn't expect that I'm going to be thinking about my grass the rest of the day today, but we got to go to break soon. But Melissa, any thoughts on the mindfulness practice as well here?
Yes, I agree. And I think it's also not just kind of observing your thoughts, but also kind of prioritizing. Like I kind of think about it when I'm working with my kids and other people. It's like pick your battles. What are you going to pick your battles for your kids? And the same thing as a parent. Do what you prioritize first. And the other stuff, sometimes you're just not going to get there. Right. And you just kind of have to let it go.
Right. Maybe for tomorrow or next week. Yeah. You've been listening to Melissa Whitson, who's a professor of psychology at the University of New Haven, and George Gogis, who's with Charter Oak Therapeutic Services. And parents, today's show is all about you. Remember, we want to hear from you. Let us know if you have any questions or any stories that you'd like to share with us. 888-720-9677. Leave us a comment on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live, or you can also email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. This is Where We Live from Connecticut Public Radio. I'm Catherine Shin. Parental burnout and stress can be caused by many different things. And today, we're hearing about how parents are managing in this ever-changing world. And parents, we still have time to hear from you. Let us know how you're coping today. Join the conversation, 888-720-9677, or find us on Facebook and Twitter at Where We Live. So I actually want to start this conversation by taking a call from Luke, who is calling in from Middletown. Luke, you're on the air.
Hey, how are you?
Good. Go for it.
So I just wanted to share, you guys were just speaking about like helicopter parents, and I've got kind of a unique experience. I've got a 13-year-old and I've got a 2.5-year-old. And this past weekend, we had a birthday party and it was at a park. And the parents of like the 4 and 5-year-olds that were there were right on top of their kids on the playground. And I'm sitting on the bench, being a little more relaxed, letting my 2.5-year-old try to like climb something that he could fall and get a busted lip. But, you just want to try and give him an opportunity to go play with other kids. And it was like all these younger parents with these 4 and 5-year-olds, their parenting style, like in the last 10 years from when I raised my 13-year-old as a 2-year-old, the style has really shifted in a dramatic way. It was kind of eye-opening for sure.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your experience with us, Luke. And I just remembering all the scrapes and bruises that I got as a kid. And both of you were nodding as Luke was sharing his story. So Melissa, let's start with you. Any responses to that?
Yes, I think that's so true. And probably there are some parents or people that were giving you a dirty look because you weren't monitoring your child so closely, which is totally not appropriate, but again, speaks to some of those expectations around keeping children safe from any kind of harm, either physical or mental, and the pressure to do that, where it's kind of exhausting, but it also blocks your ability to talk to other parents and make those connections that the previous speakers were talking about. That's really so important to kind of create your village and create your support group.
Yeah, that's one thing that I noticed. I've done a lot of work with social anxiety, and there's something called safety behaviors. Basically, they're behaviors that people develop, like checking their phone, for example, right? Which in the moment reduces anxiety, but long-term creates a bigger problem. One thing that I noticed having a beautiful 7-year-old daughter and going to different parties with parents is I feel like social anxiety is an aspect of that hovering and just locked on the kid on the playground or whatever. That gives them some sort of purpose to be there, right? Oh, I can't talk and chat but because I'm watching this kid on the slide or something. So I feel like that is an aspect of it too, is just people needing to come more together, be part of a community more.
Well, we talk about phones and technology a lot today, too, and we have an email from our listener, Margaret, who has a little different perspective here. So Margaret shares with us that I have an 8th grader and 6th grader. So much of our children's homework is offered through online educational sites like Quizlet, etc. And because there are so many online distractions, I feel like I have to directly oversee my younger child's online work. It's impossible, leading to arguments and frustrations all around. Well, thank you so much, Margaret, for sharing your story with us. Melissa, get your perspective here. We talked a lot about technology. Can you respond to what Margaret just shared? Any tips for managing that? Because that's fairly new, I think, for some parents.
Yes, I think that's really difficult. And certainly from a school district perspective, we have to think about, do we need all these online resources? And also, how are we teaching kids to not have those distractions, or how to navigate the internet in that way? And I think that comes back to parents and schools about how can we teach kids how to work with those distractions? Because they're going to have them when they're older.
Right.
So we don't necessarily want to block them entirely, but we want to have important conversations and education around how do we work with these distractions, when's the right time, and how can we make sure that we're focusing on what we need to focus on and using things at another time when it's more appropriate.
Well, and I want to go from distraction to expectations, because George earlier talked about measuring our expectations. And this can be really important for parents and families that feel like they need to do everything. They need to do it all. They need to cut grass twice a week. How should parents go about setting their own expectations for themselves, not holding themselves to societal expectations or what someone else might see as expectations?
Well, I think the first part is developing that mindfulness or awareness. Last time over here, we talked about those influences that are passed along generationally. And values change every generation. So why don't that influence or what we're told we're supposed to be? And I think it's our own ideas of what certain things are supposed to look like, the household. Do you have to clean the whole house in a 10-hour day, or can you just do a couple rooms and then move on, as simple as it sounds? But it's really hard to recognize, I think, because there's a lot of external influence out there affecting how we think about ourselves and those around us. But just being aware of what you're being told is desirable, and as a family, as an individual, making those conscious decisions of what is most important to me.
Well, Melissa, how are you navigating parental anxiety as a parent yourself?
Well, it's definitely tough. I am anxious, and my daughter is anxious. She did a report on anxiety, so things have definitely changed.
Was it helpful?
I think it was, because she has some education around it. And so I'm always very careful about how my anxiety might come across, because she's very tuned into me, into my feelings and things like that. So I do have to be mindful, as George was speaking about. And I think that that's super important, to be aware of how it's impacting you so that it doesn't impact you when you don't want it to impact you. But I also think it's important for all of us to realize that, this anxiety that parents are feeling today is also not our fault. Of course you're feeling anxious based on the state of the world today and the lack of supportive resources for the high expectations of parents. Anyone would feel anxious in that situation. In psychology, we often talk about a level of anxiety that might be pathological, but that means that the anxiety is not appropriate for the situation or circumstance. In this scenario, you have a confluence in which the anxiety is totally understandable and normal for what parents are facing today. And when I talk about, that confluence, I'm talking about the higher expectations for what parents are supposed to do, including the work-life balance that's unsustainable, and the state of the world that's just filled with anxiety, and primarily the lack of systems and supports and resources for parenting to help us meet those higher expectations. So it's not parents' fault. It's often the system's fault.
We've got about a minute here, but George, would love your response as well. How are you navigating this, not just as a therapist, but as a father as well?
Well, I think, it's hard to really combat all of the influence of negative things going on, but I always tell people that's only one part of the picture. If we can be present, I always say the best thing you can give your kids is your full attention, your presence there with them, playing Barbies all day or doing whatever, coloring. And it seems simple, but that it's energy, right? They feel supported. They feel like they're next to you. So although it's important to know a lot of this information that's going on, as I said, that's one piece of the puzzle of everything that's going on. That's why gratitude, because being present is grateful, right? Right now, it's really nice being out here in the woods versus, everything's fallen down or. So just being present, focusing on gratitude, just to kind of balance it out a little bit. America has a hard time with balance. I'll just say that,
That's true.
So what I'm taking from this is, clean one room at a time. Don't cut grass twice a week. Anything you want to add to that, Melissa? We've got about 30 seconds left.
I totally agree that being present in the moment, the kids just want you to be there. But even when they're older and teenagers, they don't want you telling them what to do or controlling their lives. They want to know that you're there, and you can show that by just being present in the moment and helping them stay present in the moment as well.
Well, as you were saying that, I can picture my teenage self locked in my room with loud music playing, but shout out to my parents because they are present in my life. So appreciate you all. Thank you so much. You've been listening to Melissa Whitson, who's a professor of psychology at the University of New Haven. Melissa, it was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you so much.
And also George Gogas, who's with Charter Oak Therapeutic Services. George, thank you so much for coming back on Where We Live.
Thanks for having me.
I'm Catherine Shen. Today's show is produced by Tess Terrible. Our technical producer is Dylan Reyes. Download Where We Live anytime on your favorite podcast app. And let us know if you have a story idea or any feedback. Email us at wherewelive@ctpublic.org. Thank you so much for listening.